Hi, and yeah, welcome to basically another analysis video I'm doing here of low rated players, well, lower rated than myself, and I'm gonna, try to do this in a way that I do my long play games and explain, what these maybe lower rated players should have been thinking, the typical mistakes that they make, which lots of people do make, so we can try to improve from them ourselves, and generally just sort of analyze this game. And it's a positional game, this one, so normally I look at crazy tactical games, but this is a more of a positional maneuvering game. So I think understanding in these types of positions is more important than actually tactics, so we're taking a little bit of a different approach here. And it's from the Summer Chess League, which is happening in London, and I'm going to try to do like the odd game here and there when I can of analysis of the key games of the week, just to sort of give my GM stance on what I think's happening. And we generally pick an interesting game from each week, and like I say, it doesn't have to be the best game, but it just has to be an interesting game. And this one was a very hard fought fight. We had Mohammed Islam with white and Malcolm Dancy with black, and it was a real good strategical fight. But I also think it's a really good game to get our teeth into, to try to work out like what the players could have done maybe in a strategically at a deeper level. Now, before we start, I would like to give a shout out to a 10-year-old player who might be watching this, and that is to Hey Deem. Hello, Hey Deem. Come on, I hope you're a grandmaster at some day in the future. And Hey Deem plays for a team called Totally Hammered, and that sounds like the kind of team that I could easily fit into. My previous teams being the Drunken Knights, etc, etc. So Totally Hammered, hello to Hey Deem. I hope I've said that right. My pronunciation's not always the best, as we know, but anyway, okay, so let's have a look. And to explain the ELO rating, I don't know the conversion properly, but I'm assuming both players here in ELO rating terms, because this is ECF rating. I would assume they're probably about 1800, something like that, I guess. So it's a great game, because I think that's the sort of range of most people who watch my videos, probably that and a bit lower. So I think it's a great game to try and help generally out. Okay, enough of me talking, let's get on with it. So white started with c4. So this is a move I played for basically in every game up to about the age of 18. So I played it for 12 years, and I didn't play any other opening in order to become an IM. And I think this is quite a good strategy, sticking to one opening. I talk about this in a course I've just done, a 16-hour course, which I've advertised in some of the other videos. It was on sale through iChess. You can now buy it directly from the GingerGM site. I'll give you more details of that later, and there'll be a link below where you can purchase that. And again, GingerGM is now offering it half price just for 7 days. So, a little bit of information here. There it is in the GingerGM shop, but I'll give a link below the video if you're interested in purchasing that course, which is a 16-hour course. But I talk about in that how openings are so important. But my strategy is to get better. You should really just pick one or two openings and get to understand where the openings are going to lead, because openings really is the start of a story, the game of chess being the story. And whenever you're starting a story, you're in charge of it, you're kind of writing it. The best writers, when they're doing a story, always have a plan of where the story is going to develop. So what will be the middle part of the story, and how will it end? They have an idea at least, and worse writers, generally will just not know what they're writing about and make it up as they go along. But it's the same in chess. You really need to have an idea of what middle game positions you're aiming for, even what end game positions you want to play, what tactics are very likely to occur in the pawn structure which you create. You're creating the story, so it's so important to have this in mind when you pick your opening. So now it starts with g6, and white now goes into a d4 opening, so d4. I hope you like my psychedelic t-shirt today. I just thought it'd be quite funny to wear it. You can see if I do that, then we've got some quite funny effects going on. And now bishop g7, knight to c3. So this is all very normal. And here black has a number of strategies. Black can play knight to f6, and that would be the King's Indian defense proper. Black can play the move he played. He can also try to avoid moving this knight until he can maybe put it on e7. But the move played c5 is an interesting move, and it normally leads to more Benoni types of structures. For example, white nearly always, well, the best move for white really is always to meet c5 with d5, because this pawn positionally, as we're going to see, it is a real thorn in black's side because it's really well protected. It's far advanced into already black's territory. It's in the middle of the board, and this pawn can really cramp black for the rest of the game. It was Alekhine who said that when you have a secure pawn on d5, for example here, and you often get this in numerous openings when you play d4, then you should play normally positionally, and you should aim to cramp your opponent using that pawn as the basis to cramp your opponent. And this happens in so many games. We'll come back to that concept later on. Now, black has two main moves here, theoretically wise. Black has d6, which is aiming for a Benoni when black will try to play e6 and take on d5. And this is the most dynamic line that black can play. Now, an old favourite of Grandmaster David Norwood, who was a very talented English Grandmaster, was bishop takes c3 check. And this is very interesting, this move, because you get a change in strategy very early on. You've kind of here marked your territory straight away, because you've given up as black your dark square bishop, so your king is going to be a bit weak. It's liable to be attacked, but you've created these double pawns, which means you have targets you can attack easily. For example, queen here, and then black normally goes d6 and tries to bring his knight to b6 and over here. And this is an interesting way to, maybe something worth considering for some of you. In the game, e5 was played, and this is a move I don't know. Now, one thing, a little tip I'd say, if your opponent ever plays a move which you haven't seen very early on and not expecting, you should probably ask yourself the question, why is that move so rare? And there's often a reason, and there's often a way to try and punish that move, because if it's not played often, there might be something wrong with it. So I would be thinking here, right, well, this is okay structure. If black can play d6 and maybe f5 later on, that's what my opponent's aiming for. But I'd be thinking now, well, he hasn't played d6 yet, and I can now maybe try to punish this. I would play here without a shadow of a doubt the move d6. I'm pretty, I'd play this move or another move I'll show you in a second, but this is a way to try and punish black's idea. d6 is not as good when black has a bishop on f8, because then black can go queen here and d6 becomes weak. But in this position, this is a real like, thing in the middle of black's guts here, this pawn, because black can't now move the d6 pawn. Black has to watch out for moves like knight b5, knight d5, and this pawn looks pretty solid to me. And really, this one pawn on d6 has split the black army in two. The black army can't coordinate now. It's split into two. So I like that move. Another move I'd be thinking of would, the way white played was very logical when we get into a strategic battle. But a move I'd also be thinking of, can you guess it, is h4. Harry. And the point of this is, I often play this when black goes g6. But in this position, it seems to be a particularly good idea. Because again, I've already got some say in the center. Often when you play on the wing, on the sides of the board, you have to have control of the center in order for it to work. And here I've got very good control with my two pawns here, and I just want to be a nuisance with this pawn. And it has a strategic aim, which I'll come back to in a second. Okay, let's go on with the game. Knight to f3, and they both play standard development, d6, e4. I'm not a big fan of Malcolm's next move because this reminds me of an opening system I used to play as black. The snake. Well, it's a bit like a what's it called? Oh God, Benoni. Check Benoni, which is a line where you play this c5 and e5. And the issue with this is you're probably slightly worse as black. But in when the pawns get locked like this, you have what we call a closed position. Closed positions in their nature are much more strategical because there's not going to be many tactics because there's no lines for the tactics, open lines for the tactics to work. So when your pawns are interlinked, you've got to think in strategic ways. And a very important thing to bear in mind is pawn breaks. You've got to look where your pawn break's going to come from in when your pawn structure's locked. Otherwise, you're going to be having no counterplay. And black's main pawn break here is f5. But if you play f5 straight away, there's some annoying move like knight g5, and I don't like this knight coming in. But if I was black, I would be trying to prepare f5 at all cost here. So I'd probably play knight e7 with the idea here of playing h6 first because I want to control g5. And then basically f5 as soon as I can so I can get my pawn break in. Because if I can't play f5 as black in this position, what am I ever going to do? I'm always going to be struggling to find any counterplay. I need to strategically play f5 or strategically I'm probably lost. And that is actually, true. b5 is not very realistic pawn break because I can always put a stop to that with a4 as we see in the game. So black's only pawn break is f5. So if I was black, I'd really do everything in my power to prepare this move. Instead, knight to d7 was played, and I'm not entirely sure that this is a good move. I think it's the wrong square for the knight. I mean, if you want to move that knight, I would have put the knight on c7. Why would I put it there? Because, well, let's say after, I don't know, bishop e2, knight c7, it does, first of all, allow your bishop some way to come out. And often, as black, you want to swap off this bishop on c8 because it's a very bad piece. And I'd probably, if given a chance, play bishop g4 and take the knight off. Otherwise, the bishop on c8 is always trapped because white's pawns are trapping it out. The bishop is very bad. In actual fact, both of black's bishops are bad pieces, and generally you want to exchange them. So I don't get in the way of the bishop with the knight, and maybe I can then try a6, for example, and rook b8 and b5. The knight here is much better placed. I mean, probably all in all, what would I play if I was black here? I'd probably, as black, play bishop g4, exchange off the bishop. Another rule is, when the position is closed, so when you have locking pawns, knights actually become better than bishops because knights work better in closed positions. So taking off on f3 is a very normal idea. The slight issue here is it makes it harder to play f5, but it's certainly worth considering. Another thing, actually, that I've seen Aronian play when he gets this kind of structure is to try and play bishop h6. Because he thinks this bishop is bad. I don't like that in this position, but again, these things are worth considering. Okay, now what should white play here? Well, if I was white here, I'd be thinking, right, well, I have a space advantage. Where's my pawn break? My pawn break is going to be b4. There's nothing that black will be able to do in the long run to stop that. Even if he goes a5, he can only get the maximum of a pawn on a5 and a pawn on c5, stopping me going b4. So I can always get more than two things. I can go a3, rook b1, and I can really prepare b4. So b4 is going to come. So I could play it straight away, but I'd also be thinking, right, well, where's my opponent's pawn break? I work out it's f5, and I want to think, how can I put my opponent off playing f5? And again, this is a time for Harry, h4, because this little move in this type of structure has a very defined positional purpose to it. And the positional idea is to stop f5. For example, let's say black tries to, meet Harry by... There's a couple of things black can do when he's fianchettoed and you've gone h4. There's generally three things black can do. Black can either play h5, stop Harry in its tracks. That's number one. Black can play h6, in order to meet h5 with g5. That's number 2. And lastly, black can, basically allow Harry to come to h5. Now let's take them one at a time. If black ever plays h5, he's going to find it really hard now to ever play the break f5. Why? Well, strategically, I'm just going to put it on the board. Let's say bishop e2, f5. If he ever plays this move, not now, but maybe later, just look at the pawn structure now. Well, white has complete control of g5. And you can go knight g5 and black will never be able to play h6. So this square g5 is under white's complete control. So it looks to me that black won't be able to play f5 in case 1. What if he plays h6? Well, here we can go here and g5. And now there's a gaping hole on f5. I mean, this square here, it's going to be really hard for black to play f5, and this is an outpost now. I try to maneuver my knights around. I'd probably play something like knight e2, knight g3, and then I'd try to get my other knight to e3, and I'd want to get a knight into that lovely, lovely, beautiful outpost. I had a game like this, which maybe I'll show you another time. But black's bishop on g7. Look at the cage it's in. The black pawns trap that bishop. It's basically a glorified pawn, that bishop. So in case 1 or 2, we've stopped it. And if you ever allow me to play, let's say knight e7, you ever allow me to play this h5 move, well, now if you ever play f5, I can certainly do something like taking on g6, taking on f5, and and this kind of thing can really, now you see I've cleared up the g and h pawns, can really weaken the black king. And again, knight g5 here, trying to take advantage. You don't have a pawn on g6, could just be a winning move. So strategically, Harry 4 works very well in this position. Now both sides maneuvered in a quite typical fashion. I still think white has a very pleasant position here, as long as white stops f5. Knight h6, h3, useful move. Maybe white should play g4 to really control f5. a6, queen d2, and now the knight's attack. The knight has to move. Bishop d3, good move because we're trying to give the f5 square more hold. Rook b8, a4, stopping b5. Now, if I was black here, I'd probably realise my position is very bad, because where is my pawn break? f5 I can't really play. My opponent can always stop it. So I'd want to now, as black, stop white's pawn break, which eventually is going to be b4. So if I was black, I'd probably lock things down on the queen side with a5, because I could see later on that that's where I'm going to be weakest. At least this way, I block up the queen side and I stop now this b4 move, because I've made white play this move a4. So that's what I do as black. I try to take away white's pawn break. It's all about in closed positions, looking at your opponent's pawns, stopping them breaking. Instead, knight b6 is played. I'm a little bit, I don't know. I think this is a very slow plan. It's not a very good square for the knight, but black was cramped anyway. Now, I have to say, for the next 10-15 moves, white plays very well here. Queen c2, bishop d7, rook b1. And now it's the last chance for black to play this a5 move. Black should really play this, because look how much trouble he gets in after knight a8, b4. This break helps white. b6, and now white took on c5. I mean, a5 was a very interesting idea here. This is the typical way to try to break down black's queen side. And the problem is, I think the way white played was also good, but black doesn't have any counterplay. This is the real problem. He still can't play f5, so it's all white who's having the fun. It's a horrible situation to be in for black. To Malcolm's credit, he defended excellently, and he played some very, tough moves. So let's have a look. B takes c5, castles. White takes over the b file, very normal. And now queen b2, just aiming to come in with the queen. And now Malcolm plays eventually f5. It's a pity it's a bit late here, because black wants to attack on the king side, maybe with some desperate sacrifice over here, or f4 and g5. But in order for these attacks to work, he's going to need to keep the queens on the board, because he's going to be attacking white on the king side. And it certainly helps white to exchange queens here, because if he does, the attack will come a lot less vicious. So white aims to swap queens, and again, white has all the play here. Now, again, a little mistake here. Bishop c8 is too passive. This was the only mistake, a big mistake Malcolm made. He should have gone rook takes, with the potential idea of, well, the bishop has to move here, of now trying to make his worst pieces, Malcolm's worst pieces, better, and covering some squares. So I'm looking, this piece is bad, these pieces are bad, but the bishop on g7 is always bad behind the pawns. And a very typical idea here is bishop f6. This is a plan you see in the Kingsian defense, to try and bring the bishop around, and if you're fortunate enough to get it on the other side of your pawn structure. So, if the bishop pops out to a5, you can either swap it off at any of white's pieces, because then you get rid of your bad piece. But also it does a good defensive role here on d8. It controls a lot. And here, I think black's keeping the balance here. I don't think black's worse even, because, black can try and swap pieces by putting the bishop on c7 and then going rook b8. White's main benefit is he has control of the open file. His rook is better. But, going back to what Alekhine said, you can also see that the pawn structure, as well, is slightly better for white, because he has this suffocating pawn on d5. As Alekhine said, this pawn gives him a nice space hold in the centre. Instead, bishop takes c8 seems a bit passive. And now here, I would have probably not gone a5 straight away, because I don't see the need for that. In order to win this position, white might need some squares on the queen side. And this square a5, I'm kind of thinking, is a good square for a knight. Could I even get a knight to b3, then there? So let's go back. Maybe my knight could go e2, c1, b3, and put a knight on this square, then bring my knight to c6. That'd be a fantastic square. Or another thing is, maybe I could bring my bishop to this square and come in, or just keep it there, killing the knight on a8. But I think rook b8 here now in this structure is really tough for black, because if you go bishop d7, you now give up the b7 square. Exchanging rooks would leave black absolutely fine here, as we see in the game. But after rook b7, and now let's say we put the rook on a7, our rook is a real nuisance for black, and I think white has a big advantage. So I think this move a5 is okay, because of course we're trying to get the knight in, but you don't really want to be swapping off this knight for black's terrible knight on a8. The knight on a8 is absolutely atrocious. Whenever you go in with your pieces aiming for an exchange, you should always be thinking, when you are able to finish that exchange off, is your piece better than their piece? If it is, why are you even trying to exchange off that piece? Because, this knight on a8 has no future for me. And it really can't go anywhere. I mean, it can't go here. Even if it goes to c7, where's it going to go next? I mean, the only other square is e8. I mean, it can go anywhere on the board. It can never find a good square. So I don't want to swap that knight off. So I think this is the wrong sort of plan here. Okay, h5, knight a4, bishop f6. And now, well, I think white should have played this a bit calmly. Maybe I would have tried to move this knight around somewhere, like, just to try to... It's not doing anything there. And that would also give him the opportunity of going bishop e2, attacking this. I'd probably try to move it around to the queen side. Rook b8 here is wrong, because after bishop d7, I think it was just a blunder probably on Mohammed's part. Because the bishop's attacking the knight, white now has to exchange off rooks. And now white has lost all of his advantage. So Malcolm's defended very, very, very well here, and he's pushed his pawns to create this play over here. He's been a real, real hard defender over there on the king side and the queen side. And this position's now equal. White goes in with b6, and this is asking a little bit too much, because after the exchange and the only move, bishop c8, this b pawn is now weak. But both sides now play very accurately, and they gain a draw. Well, okay, if I was white here, I'd probably play g3. and try to get some kind of play over there. But even that is going to be all right for black. Instead, bishop c2, and I think now, as long as black holds this, black is absolutely fine. But this pawn on b6 is easier for black to attack than white to defend. But white plays very well here to now go from being the aggressor to the defender. So all credit to Mohammed, who went from being the having the advantage to defending. It's a very hard thing to do in chess. And let's see. Well, good idea. This knight wasn't ever good on f3. It should be coming around. And after some exchanges, we can see that white brings his, very good positional play from both sides here. I have to say, they both maneuver their pieces in the best way they can. And black's maneuvering, I think, is very nice because the knight is aiming to attack b6 or come this way. And this long route that black's done with the knight is all aimed for this. So it's nice maneuvering from Malcolm. And remember, a closed position, you have more time to maneuver. But also white is maneuvering very well. He has moved his knight to the only square that can hold the position together. And we can see that eventually black does get 1, 2, 3 pieces attacking b6. But even when he wins b6, white finds a very simple way to hold the draw. He just goes knight takes, king c3, and there's no way at all here that black can do anything. If he ever moves the knight, he could lose because the bishop will come in and start taking pawns. And both sides are probably advised here to just move their kings backwards and forwards in order to take the draw. The extra pawn is irrelevant. So I think a very nice strategic game. Some good points from both sides. They both played a good game there. Well fought game. Good defending and strategic attacking. There were some moments there I tried to point out which they could have improved and should have been thinking of in a deeper way, especially the pawn breaks that they have from these closed positions. That's a key lesson to learn here. When you have a closed position, make sure you restrain your opponent's pawn breaks, and try to create your own pawn breaks, as long as they change the position in your favour, of course. There's no point playing a crappy pawn break. But well played both guys, and that's my analysis. Now, last reminder, we are selling the GingerGM method now. If you're waiting for us to sell it on my website, GingerGM.com, it's now, we're going to do our sale now, so it's at half price for 7 days. It's this is the last week I'm going to push this project. I'm actually going to Dundee in a couple of days, so I won't be doing many YouTube videos shortly. I'm going to have to, I try to prepare some, but I just haven't had time. But if you want to support me and you want to learn a 16-hour course, you can buy this now from GingerGM.com, and you'll see it advertised there. There it is. There's a link in the description below here where you can also buy it. And of course, any purchase on GingerGM supports everything I do and my good friend Simon Ansell, so we can create more good free content and generally content which hopefully you enjoy. So thank you very much for watching that video. I hope you enjoyed it, and back again, well, I don't know when, maybe tomorrow I'll try to get a cheeky vid in. Bye for now.